Hey, Coach, how are you?
I'm doing great, Grant.
Man, this is actually it's an honor to have you on my show, and it's more than just having an interview with you because people don't know this that you're the head football coach for California High, which is my alma mater, but we have a very similar path that we've taken as coaches and athletes. We both went to Chabot Junior College, went to Sonoma State, played quarterback, and then now you're actually at my school doing great things. And we're going to be talking about culture today and your mindset as an athlete and as a coach. So to me, I'm like a little kid right now because just an honor to have you on my show.
Well, I appreciate you letting me come on and talk a little football.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we get into culture, because I know that you're spending a lot of time doing that right now at Cal High with this being your second year and you're doing great things with the program. But let's talk about mental toughness. So when you think about being mentally tough, what does that mean to you?
Well, a couple of things come to my mind. Mental toughness is, to me, somebody who is experiencing some adversity when they're playing a sport, or getting ready for a sport. Could be an injury, could be going through a slump, could be anything like that. But just keeps grinding through the adversity and keeps working hard and just kind of overcomes that. Just somebody who just keeps fighting and grinding.
And you've coached, many teams, many programs, been doing this for a long time.
Hmm.
Is there a way and I know there's different ways to achieve mental toughness, but throughout your years of coaching championship programs, is there something that sticks out as far as how to coach mental toughness, or maybe some of the things that you've done or your staff has done to coach mental toughness?
Well, from a coaching standpoint, obviously you have different types of student athletes that you're working with. Some kids are just more mentally tough, some are a little bit on the softer end. So as a coach, you have to kind of identify who your guys are, because you coach everybody different. And then, in football, you have so many guys, and then you have so many coaches that you're working with. So you have to really kind of identify who your guys are. But like for us and in my programs, we always try to put as much stress and adversity and making it hard on them in practice, so that the games are a little bit easier. And then, and that could be anywhere from, conditioning before practice and just different things that you can do to,
Yeah.
do that kind of stuff to make guys go through some hard stuff in practice to help them in the game.
Well, I like that answer because not too long ago I had Mike Blasquez on my show, who is the head
Mm.
head conditioning
Oh
coach
yeah. He's a good
for
buddy of mine too. He's awesome.
yeah for
Yeah.
Berkeley, and he was like, when it comes to mental toughness, you have to train whatever you're doing, but you have to train your athletes in the environment they're going to compete in.
Hmm.
So, because we were talking about, there's some mental toughness programs out there where, you're in the ocean and you're swimming with a rock against the current, and you have to take it from one place to the next. And Mike was
Hmm.
like, "That's great, that's cool. That develops mental toughness and grit and all that. But
Hmm.
how's that translate to the environment that you're competing in?"
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
so stressing them out, not into stressing them out, but you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
challenging
Yeah.
them in practice. So
Hmm.
it's a little bit easier on game day.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we, and also as coaches, everybody emphasizes so much on winning, which, I'm just as competitive as the next guy. But, it's not always about winning. It's about how you go about your practice and how you prepare for the season, off season, all that kind of stuff. So we really try to put the kids in situations where they're having to overcome different things.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about adversity and overcoming things, 'cause I know that you played at a high level as an athlete in football and baseball, but even with coaching, like when you look
Hmm.
back as an athlete and also as a coach, when did you have, like, when was that instrumental, monumental moment where you had to be mentally tough?
Well, I think for me as an athlete, is when I played minor league baseball in the Giants and Brewers organization, and I was a journeyman catcher. I kind of bounced around from place to place, and I didn't play every single day, but I wanted to, and I want to try to make it to the big leagues and all that kind of stuff. And when I was playing AA in El Paso, I went on a 0 for 43 hitting slump.
Wow.
And, you lose a little bit of confidence in yourself, after going 0 for 15, 0 for 20, but my approach to the game never changed. I kept working hard. I would stay after the games and, more BP, all that kind of stuff. And then, eventually you get a hit here and there, and then you're kind of back on your way. But you start questioning, like, why am I doing this? I'm traveling all over the place for what? I'm 0 for 40. What are we doing here?
Right.
But you just kind of, you just kind of grind through it and you fight through it, and you have your goals that you're trying to achieve, and that's what you do.
Right. And now that you're coaching and have been coaching, whenever you see an athlete going through a slump, whatever that looks like and however long it is, does the moment that when you went 0 for 40, does it resonate with you when you see a kid that's struggling? Because I can only imagine, like, when you were going 0 for 40, there's a lot of negative self-talk, probably a lot of noise that you had to deal with, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can definitely sympathize with athletes that are going through, different types of slump. Like, obviously now I'm coaching football, so that's going to look a little different than baseball. But when I see one of my players, or a player like I'll take my quarterback this year. He plays baseball. He was going through a similar thing in baseball last spring. And, I would talk with them and try to get him through it, as far as, like, keep doing what you're doing. You're a good hitter. You've been a good hitter your whole life. This is just a little blip in your career right now, but just keep fighting through it. And I just try to kind of encourage them that way. Like, don't change your approach to the game, have the confidence, and just, keep working.
Right. My mentor, Graham Betchart, I remember we were working with an athlete, and he was sharing with this athlete, dealing with someone that was choking, right, quote unquote. Yeah. And I remember that when the kid brought up this, his scenario, it was funny because Graham was like, he's like, "That's awesome." And the guy looks at him like, "I just told you I'm choking." He's like, "Yeah, that's awesome that you're choking. It's part of it. That's how you become great. This moment is where this is, like, if you're present to it and present to the process and the journey of it, this is where greatness exists." And I remember the kid was just like it took him a while to get that.
Oh,
but it's part of the hero's journey, like, that you have to fail. You have to embrace that. And it's uncomfortable. Like, it sucks, but
it does. Yeah.
If you can move through it, that there's beauty in the pain.
There really is. And, kind of to answer your question on the flip side of when I'm coaching, when I first started coaching, I started coaching at San Leonard High, and the program was not very good. They had gone 0 and 20. There was no school spirit. I mean, it was a bad deal. So those first 3 or 4 years, when you're building a program and a culture and putting a staff together and all that, I mean, it was like we went 2 and 8, 3 and 7, and you start questioning some of the things you're doing. And then you kind of get over that hump, and then we go 9 and 2, 12 and 1, 12 and 1, 12, and then it starts rolling. You can look back at those lean times. And I remember talking with my brother, who helped me coach, and then a couple other guys who's actually coaching at the 4-year level now, just saying, like, that was our best coaching when we were 2 and 8 and 3 and 7. Like, that's when we were really grinding and coaching our butts off. Yeah, it's great when you have 5 guys that are Division I athletes and you're winning 12 games.
Right.
But the hardest part was going through that 2 and 8 season with, not such great athletes, but, going through the grind. And it's just exactly what you said. But when you're going through it, and then especially when you're younger, when you're 17 or 18 and you're going through it, it's really hard to buy into the fact that, hey, you have to go through this to be great. And you're like, no way, this sucks.
Right. Exactly. And then you throw on social media, and so we didn't have to deal with that when we were playing. But
I know. Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that as far as how that affects culture. But I do want to just dive in a little bit on your mindset before we get into culture. As an athlete, when you were competing, like, how different was your mindset as an athlete versus a coach, or being a coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't thought about it too much. Ever since I was little, like from what I can remember, like when I started playing sports at 8 years old, I hated losing, and I just I just didn't like to lose. So I love the competition. I
Mm,
would fight and claw, and then I was always an undersized guy, and I didn't realize I was undersized until I started getting like senior year in high school and college when they start writing articles about how small you are. But I never thought about that.
right.
I like to compete. I like to win. I hate to lose. And I'm going to do everything I can to win, within the rules, all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So as a player, I think it's kind of transferred over as a coach where, I mean, I'm not a great coach. I'm not a very smart guy. I mean, I can get through some things and see some things, but I think it's the competitiveness in me to not want to lose, and I'm going to figure out some ways on how to be good and how to beat my opponent. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, like when you go back to like when you were at San Leandro, when you first started coaching and you were going through those
Hmm.
tough couple of years, like how do you deal with that? I mean, because again, here you are, you're a coach and an athlete that hates to lose, and
Hmm.
you're taking over a program that probably has no culture. So you have to reinvigorate
Right.
that culture. So how do you as an individual, as a coach, because you're leading the program, everyone's following you.
Hmm.
How do you mentally deal with those type of years?
Yeah. That's a good question. I was pretty young when I got the head job. I was 26, and I had just gotten done playing baseball. So
Mm,
football wasn't even on my mind. I knew that I liked sports and I wanted to work with young people. And I'll be honest, Grant, I am truly blessed, and I believe that God had his hand on my life, and he brought people into my life when I first started coaching that was crucial.
mm,
When I first got the job at San Leandro, I'm by myself. I mean, I have my brother who had just gotten done playing at San Jose State, so it was us two trying to figure some things out. I went back to my old high school coach, Tom Linda, who had a lot of success and I thought was a great coach. So he gave me a lot of input. In fact, my first day of coaching, it was spring ball. He came out and ran the whole practice, so I was able to kind of see those couple of days of how a practice is run, because I didn't know anything about coaching, anything. And so that was big. And then I had a guy shows up to my office up in the PE room. His name was Scott Natty. He played 4 years at Cal Berkeley. He lived right around the corner and said, "Hey, I want to get into coaching." And we hit it off. And he was from Texas and had a good career in high school in Texas. And he was a huge part of building culture
mm.
in our program. So, and then I ended up getting the Zumwalt brothers who played at Cal, and Brad Bowers, who's now the coach at San Leandro. So I had four Cal guys just show up
Wow.
wanting to coach a program that was not very good. And then the four of us, my brother, and then a couple of other people. I mean, it just started to kind of grow. So I was able to build my staff with quality people to begin with, and then like really knowledgeable. And then it just took off from there, where we just started building the culture in the weight room and off season. And then kids started wanting to come to San Leandro. Like when we first started San Leandro, just in PE class, we would always end with jumping jacks, and they would jump out like Skyline or Oakland Tech. And I'm like,
Oh,
what is this all about? So
wow.
that was kind of what I was dealing with at the beginning. And then, after a few years, and now we win the league, we beat Bishop O'Dowd at their place. Now there's some school pride, and then it just kind of went from there. So, yeah, I was really blessed to have quality coaches come into my life and help me with our program.
Yeah, you're having a staff around you while you're building culture is huge, and the right staff, the ones that are bought
Hmm.
into your language and your vision. And you brought up Coach Linda, and we're talking about Coach Linda that used to coach at San Ramon High back in the day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
competed against him all through high school, right? And then went
Yeah.
to Chabot, and he was our wide receiver coach.
Oh,
And
that's right. He did go there for, yeah.
yeah, and it was when you say you had really good coaches, you had really good coaches. Like he
Yes.
impressed me. Him and I were like, I gravitated, even though I was a quarterback, I gravitated him real quick. Maybe because
Uh-huh.
there's a commonality because of, e-ball. But
Hmm.
um I know exactly what you're talking about. He was a great coach.
Oh, he was, I tell you. And that's another thing, like when I played at San Leandro, they hadn't been very good. They had some old school coaches. And then my junior year, boom, Coach Linda's the head coach. And this is a guy who was way before his time as far as like the passing game.
Right.
And, he put in this, run and shoot offense. And again, I was in a right place at the right time and had a great coach. So it's just, he's one of the best coaches that I think is around. Unfortunately, he doesn't coach anymore, but
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's get, we're touching on culture. So let's talk about it.
Okay.
Out of the things for me, at least, love talking about mental skills. That's what I do. I love talking quarterback, but when it comes to culture, it's probably one of the most favorite thing that I love to talk about, because I think maybe because I was a part of culture and I was a part of creating it and leading it, and I see the beauty and the specialness that comes out of having great culture. I mean, when you have culture, it's pretty special. So when you think about culture, like what does that mean to you? I know it's a broad question, but like, what does culture mean?
Culture to me is, because there's so many different types that you can have. And, as a coach, I think it's kind of like, like what your football team is like on the field. Are you a pound the rock, tough, strong defense? That's one, and as a coach, I think that you can really only emphasize a couple of things to be really good at. I see some programs, baseball, football, whatever, they've got like 25 different points that they're emphasizing in their program. And I don't think that you can do, I mean, they look great on a board,
right?
But you can't realistically emphasize 25 things for your program. So like for me, for our culture, what I try to promote, what kind of like who I am as a person, it's one thing that I learned my first couple of years at Chabot under Pete Davis, who was a great mentor for me and a tough guy to coach with. But I learned so much from him. And one of the things he said to me was, you can't coach the way that I coach. You can't be me, or you can't be that person. You have to be yourself and find out who you are and the words that you use and what do you want your program to be like. And it has to reflect you as a person. And that really hit home for me. And it took me a few years at Chabot to figure that out. And for me, like what I try to build in my culture and what we did at San Leandro is I'm a big relational guy. Like I love, I mean, that's why I coach, is the relationship that you have with your players and your staff, and even like your administration, the custodians, everybody that you're involved with in your program, to me is relational. So I like to have good people around me, positive people around me who are going to buy into what I'm trying to do. And, sometimes that doesn't always work out. I've had to let coaches go, 3 weeks into hiring them. Like, everybody's great in an interview, but then when you're actually out there coaching the guys and then you see them doing things that you specifically told them not to, and they're just not buying in, then they got to go. So I want people in my program that are going to be buying into what we do. And I want my players to have good relationships with their coaches, and then also with their own teammates.
Right.
Coaching at Chabot was difficult with that because, as you know, Grant, being a JC guy, you get so many players from all over the country, really, to come in and build a culture and to be teammates and one for the team, when they're just trying to get out of there. They're using junior college as a stepping stone to get to where they want to be. So that in itself is really hard. So what we tried to do at Chabot is, as the first day of camp, we get into a room, we break off into different, the O line is going to be with the D line, and we just kind of rotate them around and get to know one another, like really get to know them. Like, how many brothers and sisters do you have? What's your story? That kind of thing. So that way, when you're in the season and you're in the grind, your teammate, like, everything about them, rather than just, oh, you're from Chicago and, I got to be your teammate. And I'm not saying everybody was, best friends and all that, but it's a lot better to know your teammate when you're in the grind with them.
Absolutely. It's imperative that the person that you're competing with next to you to know more than just the athlete about them. The more that you know about their brother, their sister, their story,
Mm-hmm.
which, you and I have a commonality of, Donovan Britt, who was my running back when I was at
Mm-hmm.
Chabot. And he was my stretching partner. So for my freshman year and sophomore year,
Oh yeah.
we
Yeah.
stretched each other. So I got to know him really well, but he took time to get to know me. And there was
Mm-hmm.
times where, when you're going through life at 18 and 19, well, you're learning
Yep.
a lot about everything.
Yeah.
And I struggled through some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw more than just the athlete. He saw more than just me being his quarterback. And there was a lot of times where he would pay food for me. He would make sure I get a
Yeah.
ride somewhere, but he always had my back. And it's
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
took time to get to know who I was.
Exactly. And that's what we try to cultivate in our program. I think it's really important to have good relationships because you spend so much time with each other, just like the coaches. Like, I'm very particular on who I hire and who I want in my program, because we spend so much time together watching film, spending time on Sundays, and then our families are together, so it's really important to me who we have in our program.
Right. You talked about buy-in, and there's so many ways with that process to get someone or get a group of young men to buy in.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, I'm sure there's different things that you've done or not. Maybe like there's a certain way, this is just how I do it. How do
Mm-hmm.
you get athletes to buy in into your program or buy into your vision?
Well, I think it's a couple of different ways. I think they have to trust you first and foremost before they start buying in. So the whole relational part to me is important. And it helps with that. When I first got hired at Cal High, I knew not a lot. I knew a handful of kids because my son
Yeah.
goes there, and I've known these kids since they were 8 years old. I coached a lot of them in CYO and things like that. But in the whole program, there was probably about 70 kids that I didn't know. So it was really important for me to get to know them. And it was difficult because I got hired in February of 2020. And then we just started to start lift weights and get to know them that way. And then 2 weeks later, boom, COVID hits. Now I can't see them. I can't do anything with them. We try to do the Zoom. So that was a hurdle
Right.
to get through. But since then, since we were able to start getting together, I would try to get to know them on a personal level, in their stretching lines, in our position meetings. I'll ask a kid, what's going on? Tell me about yourself, just to get to know them, kind of like what we talked about earlier.
Right.
But you got to know, they have to trust you as a person first, and then as a coach. And then, when you have all the coaches on the same page preaching the same thing, as an example, like for us on offense, we run no huddle. So my philosophy, I want to go fast. I want to put pressure on the defense. So how do you get a 16-year-old kid who's been huddling his whole life and snapping the ball with 4 seconds left on the play clock to buy into that? Well, we practice it, we harp it, we get on them, we do pace every day, and then and then they see the benefit of it. The James Logan game, we're going fast. They got 12 guys on the field to get us a first down, and we were able to score off of that. So you point it out in film. So then the kids start to see oh man, coach kind of knows what he's talking about. And then they start buying into, that's just one example of trying to buy in. So, having their trust, having the coaches on the same page, preaching the same thing, the kids seeing the success of it. I believe that's the process of buying in.
Yeah. I think it's, I love it. It's language. The more consistent with language. And like you said earlier, there's some programs that have 20 different sayings or different, principles and core values. And it's just looks cool, but
right.
kind of hard to follow that. And, when you go to I don't know if you've seen Last Chance U, the third
I try
season.
not to. I live it, and I watched the first season, the first episode, and I saw the coach, and I said, this guy's a freaking tool.
It's tough.
I can't watch this. Yeah. So I have a hard time watching it. And I'm living it at Chabot, so I don't need to watch it.
Exactly. Well, and it's there's one, the third season has all the coach put in all these awesome sayings on the wall. They're awesome.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he doesn't actually exemplify any of it. And so I have a hard time with that. Like, man, you're going to painting the walls with your vision and your language, but you're not actually following it. So there's like a disconnect there.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that language is huge. And a quick little story: when I was coaching football at Sarah with Patrick Walsh, the teams that we were playing during every year in preseason were fast. Everything, like the tempo was fast. Like they just, so we had to adapt to that mentality. So the language was tempo, but not only was it moving fast during each drill, moving fast and controlled, but it was preaching tempo and class. So when you go from one classroom to the next, are you walking a little bit faster? When you're at home and you're folding your clothes in a controlled manner, are you doing a little bit faster? But it was the consistent language of constantly talking about tempo. So everything they did was fast and smooth and controlled.
Yeah, that's great chatter. And it can carry over to anything. Like with our strength and conditioning, I like to, instead of just writing the workout on the board, okay, guys, there's your lift, go to do it. I have it timed. You've got to be done with that set. Next guy's got to move the weight. Like it's, like you said, it's tempo, it's fast, it's game like. I'm trying to get that transfer over to what we're doing on the field. So that's good.
Well, when you think about culture, again, like you said, there's so many different parts of it. What do you think the most important part of building team culture is? What's the most important?
You mean like why?
So there's all these different things that make up culture, right? Depending on what your core values are. But to you as a head coach, like to have a very thriving culture, what's the most important part of it?
Well, I think it's kind of like, who you are as a team and as a program, is the number one reason why you have culture. I have three points of culture that I like to have in my program. And I touched on the relational part. And then another big one for us is having fun. And I think there's a misconception out there that you can't work hard and have fun at the same time. And I totally disagree with that. I think like when you're playing a sport, it has to be fun. Like you have to enjoy going out there, being with your teammates. So we try to make anything that we do and incorporate having fun, and obviously there's a time where sometimes it's just not going to be fun, but when they look back at like the off season, like, we worked our butt off and we got after it, but we had fun. Like an example, we would play basketball as part of our conditioning. We'd get into, like in March, we do it during March Madness. We'd let the guys pick their teams. We have the brackets up there. So they're having fun, but they're also working on their footwork. They're getting some conditioning, all that kind of stuff. So when they, I have guys, to this day that come back and say, Coach, man, that was the best time when I was at Chabot. We did the March Madness and the brackets were up and we won. And then I give them t-shirts, for the winter. So, and then we do at the end of spring ball, we would do an Olympics. So there would be competition with Olympics and we'd have an obstacle course out there. So they're working, they're having fun, they're getting better. All that kind of stuff. So that's something that we try to implement as far as part of our culture is relationship, having fun. And then the last one, Grant, is our kind of stems from like who I am is competitive. Like I'm very competitive. So obviously you're playing a sport, you're in competition. So we have everything that we do drill wise, weight room wise, practice wise, there's a form of competition in that. So for example, every day in our practice, we end the practice with a competition. So on Tuesday, it's 2-point play. It's the best out of 3, offense versus defense. The loser has to do whatever, some kind of up down conditioning. And then on Wednesday, we do an overtime competition. And then on Thursday, we do a 2-minute drill competition. And, obviously in junior college, it's a little bit easier because you have an offensive group and a defensive group.
Right.
So we've had to kind of modify it a little bit at Cal where, all right, Coach Milan is my DC. And, I say on 2-point play, you got the first defense. And then on overtime, I get first offense. And we kind of do it that way.
Right.
So it works out. And then we have guys pick a side who they want to choose with. But so that's fun in itself. And then any kind of drills that we're doing, even just, our EDDs, we have a drill. Like whoever catches the most balls, you get a Gatorade at the end of practice, something like that. So you're always competing, because when you're competing for something, your attention to detail, you're going to make that catch. It's amazing. Guys will be dropping balls during routes versus air. And then all of a sudden, okay, if you drop the next ball, you got 100 push-ups. Right. Boom, they don't drop a ball. So, we try to do something like that.
How about that incentive?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think when you can foster joy and having fun, because, sports does get tough.
Yeah.
In many different ways. It could be tough with teammates, dynamics with coach, injuries. I mean, losing record, a lot of things come up. So having that joy, that love, that having fun is huge. And I've seen a quick little story. I had an opportunity to work with Sue Phillips at Midi High School, which is probably one of the best all-time women's basketball coach in the country. And she's just amazing. What she does before every single practice is has all the girls sit in the key for 10 minutes, and it's their time, and they do whatever. Like they crack jokes, they sing, it's just all joy time, because she's like, I need them to get foster this joy, having love with each other, because I'm going to push the shit out of them in a second here. But it's consistent, because they're actually starting their competitive nature with joy.
So that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty neat to see, especially on a consistent basis.
Yep.
So since I'm been a part of the Grizzly Nation for a long time, and as football has changed, it's got more competitive. The way we play football, what we call football, is more competitive. You have a lot of opponents that are close to you that are very good. Now Dublin's getting up there. You always got San Ramon, you got Monte Vista, you got De La Salle. So you got all these competing teams that are fairly close. And how do you, since it's your second year, and you had a great year this past year?
Thank you.
How do you compete against that, as far as, because now there's kids that are transferring to other schools, they're living in your area, and they're going to De La Salle. So how do you actually attract? And I know it's a fine line when I'm asking this question, because we can't recruit. I get it.
Right.
But when we're talking about culture, I think that's the thing where people get drawn into. Like, I want to go to this school because of the culture. So how do you compete against all these really good schools around you? And is it important to have a very solid Pop Warner system that's going to feed into your culture?
Yes. So a couple of things there. Obviously, we can't go out and recruit, but what I try to do is I try not to worry about what San Ramon is doing, or De La Salle, or Clayton Valley, or all that, because those are all good programs and good coaches. So I kind of focus in on, okay, I'm at Cal High. What can I do, and what can Cal High do to offer the kids in this surrounding area? Because kids can go basically to any high school they want coming out of 8th grade, as long as that school is not impacted. So I can't go physically out there and recruit and tell people about my program, but how word of mouth goes, or social media goes. And the best thing that I can do is they can see the product of our program on Friday nights. And I truly believe that with the staff that I have, and the kind of kids that we have, we've been competitive in every football game. We might not win every game, but we're going to be very competitive. I think, with the kind of kids that we have, we're not the biggest, we're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're competitive. I think our offense is if I was a quarterback, receiver, running back, this is an offense that I would want to play in. It is quarterback driven. It's a college offense. I want to play college. This is perfect. And I've got a coach that's coached college. He's coached some guys that have played in the Pac-12 and the NFL. And so that would be that to me, that in itself is a good recruiting tool. But then it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is I believe that all of the kids that graduate from Cal High, or they left Chabot, or wherever I've coached, they've had fun, and they like their coaches. A big pet peeve of mine, I hate to see kids not play a sport because they don't like that coach. And I'm not
Right.
saying that everybody likes Coach Calcagno, but I think for the most part, they know that I'm coaching and I'm in it for them. I want them to have fun and have success and have great memories like I had playing for
Right.
Coach Linda or whatever coach I had. That's why I coach, is because I want them to have that experience that I have. So that's word of mouth. And when kids and people see, like, man, at Cal High, they're winning some games, they're getting coached up, they're having fun, they got a new field, whatever, they're getting their kids on to play at the next level. Those are all positive things of building a program. Getting back to the last one, I think a youth program is crucial for the success of your high school program. As you know, in California and especially the Bay Area, it's kind of a dying sport. It's just kids aren't playing as much. It doesn't help when everybody in the media thinks that you're going to kill yourself or somebody if you have a head concussion. And I'm not downplaying concussions, but
Right.
I just, the game is so much safer now. And, and football gets a bad rap because parents whose 8-year-old or 10-year-old that wants to play football, they think that they're going to be having these violent collisions like they do in the NFL. That's just not the case. I personally had more head concussions playing pickup football with my brother in the front yard than I ever did playing real football. So I think, having the youth program, we got to sell the youth a good football program. Like, the Bears, I know, have gone up and down, and they've had some good years and bad years. The T-Birds have always been pretty successful. So we just have to do a better job at Cal High of reaching out to those Pop Warner teams.
Right. Exactly. It's interesting. You touch on concussions and CTE, and I played the game for about 13 years, and have I had concussions? Yeah, and I was quarterback, but I was also wing
Right.
T, running the option, doing the fun stuff. But I've had 2 hip replacements on my hip from the game, but everybody asks me all the time, if you could do it all over again, would you still do it? 100%. I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's the trade-off that the things that I got from the game of football, the things that I got from the cultures that I was like involved in and had the opportunity to be a part of, it's allowed me to be an incredible leader. Like things that I've done outside of football is because I played football. So there's always going to be a trade-off in things, there's going to be, you have to weigh things out, but man, yeah, I got hurt. Yes. My body did, the game left a mark on my body, but man, the things that I got through the process, man, I can't even put a value on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I understand, I same thing. I was a quarterback. My brother was a linebacker. He's had 3 knee replacements already. So everybody's got a different story because of sports, but I guarantee you could find somebody that's never played a sport in their life and they're 50 years old and they probably had some knee replacements. They're probably, got a hip replacement and they never play it. It's part of getting old, So I haven't had any knee problems until just recently. And I was a catcher for 15 years. So your body's going to fall apart at some point, but there's nothing better than being on the team with, like you said, with great culture. Like my best friend today is a guy that I met at Chabot College. Right. And those are the kind of relationships that you have in sports. There's just nothing better.
Nothing better. Nothing better. That's why the game of any sport is awesome. But like I'm a little biased because I dedicated my life to football for a long time. So now that you've been at Cal High for 2 years now, and it was kind of very, very interesting that you started your first year during COVID. Worked with many coaches that had the same thing. Their first year was the COVID year, and it's just tough to deal with that.
Yeah.
What was your first day like at Cal High as far as the culture? Like, what did it look like? And what are some of the things that you thought from being the head coach, things that you needed to do a little bit different to have a healthy culture?
Without being negative on Coach Bellici, who I think is a phenomenal coach. And I think he did a phenomenal job with that program. I mean, all the games that they won, they had an identity of being strong and running the ball, good defense. I can't say enough good things about Coach Belici. But what I felt like for me, what I needed to do, and what I had, there were some kids that weren't playing football because of some negative experiences. And like I said, you're not going to appease every kid,
Right.
I'm sure that there's kids that don't like me and whatever, but I just felt, and what I was hearing was like, we just needed a different philosophy. We needed a different approach. And not to say that I'm, really laid back and do whatever you want, but I wanted to they needed to have fun playing football. We needed kids that wanted to play football, come out and have a good, positive experience. Right. And that's kind of what I felt needed to happen. And I felt like, obviously the COVID year was a little bit different, but it was fun. And we were just so thankful to get 6 games in the spring, because it was looking pretty bleak there for a second. So those seniors that graduated, I after the banquet felt like they had a great experience and had a lot of fun. This past year, same thing. Now, when you win 8 games, yeah, you're going to have more fun, and teams and people are going to be more happy than if we were, 2-8.
Right.
But again, we treat the kids with respect. We don't, nothing is personal when we're, screaming at them. It's all coaching, and we tell kids that. So it was a positive year, and that's kind of what I felt had to change at Cal High football.
That's awesome. When you think about language, and if you don't have this type of language, it's totally fine. You don't need to, but I have found in cultures that I've been a part of, as an athlete, as a coach, and also being a mental performance coach, I see that there's a lot of language, cool phrases that are repeated throughout the program, and people buy in. That's one way of them buying into the language. Mm-hmm. Like do simple better, or preparation is your separation, or row the boat, or grease the grind, whatever it is, right? You just hear these different things. Uh-huh. Are there any mantras or any kind of sayings that
Grant, I don't. I'm not. Like I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I'm not the sharpest tool in the tool shed. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a lot of those sayings. I feel like it's more of it's kind of like what you talked about earlier with that coach that had those sayings but didn't apply them in person.
Yeah.
I'm a more just, this is how you do it, and I'm going to show you through my actions, and I'm going to let you know when you're not holding up your end of the bargain. So that's, I don't have any, to answer your question, I don't have any sense. We just, I want to compete. I want to have fun. And this is how we're going to do it.
Exactly. Keep it simple.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. And it's funny, the guys that I played with, and I was class of 92, and, Coach Carabinas at the time, which, it's funny, I went from Pete Carabinas to Pete Davis at Chabot. 2 Petes, and they were beautiful in their own right, and how they mm-hmm. developed me as a quarterback. But one of the coolest things that Coach Carabinas did for the culture, and I don't think at the time we got it. And mm-hmm. in about a week or so, I'm going to be 48 years old. And in this summer, we'd have to, after double days, we're done. We had this this night of hanging out in the gym with food and movies. But we had to, each of us individually had to recite the fight song.
Oh.
And you had to do it. You had to learn it.
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring up my age is because to this day, I can still recite that like this. I can sing it. So when I'm around my friends, we're having, we're getting together, I'll start singing it, and people roll their eyes, but it's because the culture. It was because something that when I was 16, 17 years old, still to this day, it's part of me.
Mm-hmm. And you have pride in your school.
Yeah.
You're proud to be a California Grizzly, and you can fight, the fight song. One of the coolest things I took my son Jake to the TCU SMU game this year, and SMU ended up beating TCU at TCU. But what was really cool, after the game, the entire team of TCU and the head coach came over to the student section and sang the fight song after a defeat, like a brutal loss. They still came over and did the fight song, which I thought, like, man, that's pretty impressive, because I'd want to get my butt back to the locker room.
Right. Well, and again, I don't know if this is a fair question. I'll bring this up just because, again, with culture being just one of these things I love to talk about, there's a lot of coaches that I've had on my podcast that, whether if it's football or soccer, whatever sport, when I ask this question, it's really cool. Maybe you don't have the answer right now, maybe something to think about. But when I ask them, if you had to deem your culture, if you had to name your culture, like, what would it be? Because some of the ones that came up, like Coach Alma de La Salle, he said the effort culture, right? And I think we all kind of get that, you know, how they operate over there. Coach Walsh for Sarah, he was like, the feel it culture. I want you, when you're stepping on my campus or I step on your campus, I want you to feel our culture, right? So it's just like, and you don't have to have that, but it'd be interesting when you think about your culture of having fun and competing. Like, is there a word or a phrase that comes up that you can like name your culture?
I don't know. I mean, I just kind of know how I think it looks, but, you know, obviously people might have a different take on it, but it kind of gets back to what you're saying about the basketball coach at Midi. I think my culture is joyful. Like, when I think of our team and what we do at practice and in the weight room, and just when we're all together, I feel like our kids are happy and like really enjoy being there. So I would say joyful.
That's great.
I don't know if that's right or wrong or indifferent, but that's the feeling that I have when I'm around my team and when I, you know, come on to Cal High campus and think about Cal football. So,
you know, and I like that, because there's some of like Tiffany Roberts, who actually has a name or a street named after her in San Ramon, who's the head coach for UCF, for the women's soccer team there. I remember having her on this show talking about culture, and she was saying that it was do your best culture. And she had 4 principles of what you do to do your best every day, like in on the field, in a classroom, in the locker room. So she had it all planned out. There was another coach from UC Davis, Tracy Ham. And she was like, so it's kind of long, but if I was going to deem my culture, it would be the way you do one thing is how you do everything culture. So if it's joyful culture, I'm all for that, because I think if you don't have joy in your culture, you're missing something, and you're missing something really important.
I think so too. Like, we're playing a sport, and we're playing a great sport. I just, like, you gotta have fun. Like, it's gotta be joyful.
Yeah.
There has to be some funness to it. And yeah, I could be wrong, Grant. I don't know, but I just know that, you know, and there's so many different things that we try to incorporate and do, and what I want our kids to get out of our program when they graduate. But that's, you know, that's the one that comes to mind. You know, like I said, I might have a different answer for you in about 3 months. I don't know.
Well, when you reflect on your whole coaching career, also your athletic career, what do you, and this is a deep question here, and it's about reflection. And I love this because I believe when we want to gain more wisdom, we want to improve and develop, we have to reflect. So when you reflect on your whole career as an athlete, as a coach, what do you think you've learned the most about yourself?
I would have to say that I'm just as competitive as at 54 than I was when I was 26. Would be, you know, one thing that I reflect on. But then, you know, also what I love is that I learn something new about coaching every year. That's what I love about coaching. Just when you think that, oh, okay, it's kind of like your golf swing. Oh, I figured out how to hit the ball straight. And then you hit the ball straight a couple of times on the driving range, you go out on the course, and now it's crooked again. It's kind of like coaching, you know, like, oh man, we can do this and we do that, and this is how we do it. And that's not the right way. There's a better way. So I love that about coaching and how it evolves to different things. So that would be something to reflect on.
You know what? As I'm hearing the kind of the theme of a lot of your answers and just your thought process, it comes down to competing, like your spirit as a young kid and competing and hating losing, but you understand that's not all about winning; it's about competing.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I'll leave for the listeners and even for the Grizzlies out there is that it's not about you have to compete. It's about you get to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more empowerment when you get to do anything. Like you get to be a part of the Grizzly Nation. You get to put that C on. Like you get to, you don't have to do anything. You think you have to, but you don't.
No.
So, but you get to, and so you get to compete when you're actually playing for Cal High.
Yep, that's it. Well said.
Right on. Well, Coach, thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing your story and your mindset and your values on culture. I enjoyed this, and I hope my listeners do, and everybody at Cal High.
Thank you very much, Grant. It was my pleasure.